Last week's PlayStation 5 reveal climaxed with a rendered debut of the console's final form factor, showcasing a somewhat controversial and indeed gigantic design. But what nobody predicted was the arrival of two PlayStation 5 consoles. Arriving alongside the standard model is a new digital edition, which is essentially the same thing, but lacking the UHD Blu-ray drive. Crucially, Sony didn't share pricing, with CEO Jim Ryan categorically shutting down the topic in post-reveal interviews. We should expect an expensive console then, but can the digital edition bring a more affordable version to the market? In this video, I'm going to be assessing the possibilities that a discless PlayStation 5 offers to gamers, giving some idea of the economics involved in building such a machine, and what kind of options this gives Sony in reducing the price point. But first of all, I want to spend some time talking about the reveal of the machine itself, the PlayStation 5's physical form factor. I'd say personally that it came as something of a surprise. Extrapolating from specifications, our best guess was that Sony would pursue a more traditional console form factor than their competitors at Microsoft, mostly by virtue of the fact that a smaller, less capable processor in Ps5 poses fewer thermal challenges. It's an assumption I'd have doubled down on after Mark Cerny's tech reveal, based around the notion of variable clock speeds for CPU and GPU based on a set power budget. Now, when I spoke to Cerny, he talked about specific hotspots on the CPU and GPU and how the variable clock rate and the set power level actually makes them equivalently easy to cool. The final machine is something else though, a towering colossus of a unit that's considerably larger in terms of height and possibly volume than Xbox Series X. So I think there's good news and bad news about this monolithic design. The good news is that the form factor gives us every reason to be optimistic about thermal dissipation and acoustics under load. We can imagine that the heatsink and fan arrangement will be rather substantial. The design hints at air outlets from pretty much every angle after all. There is still the notion that we could have different PlayStations being quieter or louder than other PlayStations, mind you. So yeah, let's take another quick look at how Ps5's boost clock works. A power monitor sits at the heart of the chip, judging the power requirements of CPU and GPU workloads, adjusting clocks accordingly. The algorithm is based on the concept of what Mark Cerny calls the model SoC, essentially a one-size-fits-all representation encompassing all of the chips out there. However, quality of silicon varies on a per-chip basis. Pumping the same amount of power into a given SoC will produce different levels of heat on a per-unit basis. So I'm wondering whether this enormous box and the no doubt substantial cooling solution is kind of like a nuclear option to ensure that all boxes are quiet. Kind of latter-day version of what we saw on the original Durango Xbox One. My one lingering concern? Well, I spoke to a console repair company about their strategies for quietening down PS4 and PS4 Pro boxes, and basically, aside from replacing thermal grease, pretty much the main culprit for loud machines is dust build-up over the months and the years. And yeah, PlayStation 5, it does seem to be doubling down on venting there. By and large though, if Mark Cerny says that we're going to be happy with thermals and acoustics, you can rest assured that he means it. But by extension, there is some bad news, simply that the size of the thing is potentially problematic, particularly for those using media cabinets or the classic IKEA Kallax. By our reckoning, the machine's about 15 inches tall, or wide, depending on the orientation. If the Xbox Series X is two GameCubes with Game Boy players stuck together, PlayStation 5 essentially adds another cube on top. Based on how Sony is presenting the machine primarily as a tower in its promotional renderings, the firm is leaning into its more minimal footprint to give the impression of a more living room friendly machine. How this will translate to reality though, remains to be seen. The form factor reveal is massive in more ways than one, but we also get to see a couple of other sundry details. The front of the machine features two USB ports, Type A and Type C, along with what look like good old-fashioned clicky buttons for power and disk ejection. Now obviously the latter is missing on the digital edition. Blue LEDs appear to illuminate the edges of the white plastic collar, and I hope that they can be disabled as an option. And it seems that a stand of some description is required based on the images we've seen. The machine looks likely to more easily topple in the vertical configuration without one, while it's uncertain if the unit can sit level in horizontal mode if there is no stand. Now, traditionally, and rather unfortunately, console users are charged extra to buy a stand, so I hope that isn't the case here. Beyond that, what's fascinating is what Sony has declined to show us. The rear of the unit, for example, remains a mystery for now, so we've no idea of how many extra USB ports there might be, what kind of power socket is used, and whether Toslink optical audio makes the cut as an output option. After all, that one was removed from Xbox Series X. This one does strike me as curious because Sony did share the look of the rear of PS4 and PS4 Pro when they were revealed via press photography or other renders, and that's not the case this time around. Maybe the platform holder doesn't want to draw too much attention to the physical form factor, or maybe the rear of the machine reveals the existence of something that's yet to be announced. If a successor to PlayStation VR arrives, for example, you'd hope to see Sony integrate the breakout box into the main unit. Though obviously we would prefer to see a fully wireless VR solution. PlayStation 5's hardware design does look contentious, but I think we should reserve judgment until we've actually seen the unit in the flesh. Everything we've seen so far comes from CG renders after all, and as we learned from going hands-on with Xbox Series X, initial marketing materials rarely reflect the way you see and interact with a console design in real life. It's the same situation with the DualSense controller and the associated peripherals that Sony revealed at the launch event. Additionally, I was fascinated to see that Sony is set to launch with a PS5 specific headset. Bearing in mind the firm's commitment to 3D audio, it's good to see a focus there in terms of both hardware and software. What was rather frustrating was no reveal of the price point to PlayStation 5 to cap off the whole presentation, but the debut of a digital edition of the console opens up a whole new range of discussion. By not telling us how much PlayStation 5 is going to cost, and with Jim Ryan point blank refusing to discuss it, and then to start talking about addressing PS5 in terms of value rather than price. The inescapable conclusion for me at least is that the console is going to be expensive. Cost of the machine, and for next-gen consoles in general, has been a bone of contention for some time, enough for Microsoft to at least develop Project Lockhart, widely mooted as a 4 teraflop variant of Xbox Series X. No official announced there yet though, obviously. So how does a digital edition PlayStation 5 factor into the discussion? By a process of reason, common sense or logic, we must assume that the digital PS5 will be a cheaper PS5 if the platform holder removes a component that delivers so much value, like the optical drive, has to give some of that value back to the user in terms of sticker price. The alternative would be perhaps to double down on storage and then charge more for the machine. And I'd argue that a premium SKU with fewer features than the main unit in any dimension would go down like a lead balloon. If the digital PS5 is to be a cheaper machine, this presents something of a problem. Build cost will be identical to the standard machine minus the cost of a UHD Blu-ray drive. My understanding from sources is that this component would only shave around $20 or so from the build cost, meaning that apples to apples, Sony would lose more money by offering a discount that's any higher. Now, that $20 figure may well sound unbelievably low, bearing in mind how much such a drive would cost you to buy as a consumer. But remember that Sony will be buying those in bulk, in the millions. Also consider how cheaply Microsoft is able to sell Xbox One S in sales events like Black Friday, and there's a UHD Blu-ray drive in every single one of those units. Judged by that context, the $20 price on the overall bill of materials sounds a lot more plausible. It's the processor, the RAM, and the SSD storage that are the primary drivers for build cost, and of course, those will remain the same on a digital edition console. There's only so much leeway there, in other words. Of course, the cost of a console is not just defined by how much money it takes to construct. It's long been established that the platform holder's cut of game sales is used to partially offset console costs, while the arrival of online gaming subscriptions and initiatives like PlayStation Now and Xbox Game Pass add to the overall revenue Sony and Microsoft accrue across the generation. By offering a full digital console, the price of it could conceivably come down by more than the cost of the optical drive alone. Obviously, when you purchase a physical disc, there are a number of costs attached to that do not exist in the digital realm. Retailers and distribution take a cut from the sticker price, plus there's the cost of physically making the disc and its associated packaging. These costs effectively vanish with only the minuscule cost of download bandwidth to offset it. In practice, the average $60 price for a new game gets split in just two ways. The platform holder receives 30% of the price, the publisher 70%. Based on information from our sources, the estimate is that a digital purchase yields the platform holder an extra $8 or thereabouts. So in theory, just 3 or 4 digital purchases plus the saving from removing the optical drive means that conceivably Sony could offer a $50 saving on the cost of an all-digital PlayStation 5 console. Any more than that, and the logistics, the cost, the risk start to look scary. The more games you would need to buy just to offset the reduced cost of the machine, the longer Sony has to wait for its return, and the bigger the risk it'll actually lose money as opposed to breaking even or even making a profit. There may even be an extra digital dividend for Sony though, because users of a discless PlayStation 5 will be completely locked out of the used game market, and presumably the money spent there may well be rediverted in some way back towards the PlayStation Store. And in fairness, Sony has kept up an impressive cycle of digital sales, and many of those prices are pretty tempting. I mean, I got Lichdom Battle Mage for £1.84. The trouble with factoring in this potential extra income is that it's basically impossible to quantify. I can't think of a single mechanism by which any of the platform holders could track how prevalent the use of used games is, and therefore how to factor that realistically into their spreadsheets. And of course, it goes without saying that while Jim Ryan is talking about an all-digital console as an extension of choice for the user, obviously the reality is that it's actually an enormous reduction in options when it comes to sourcing your games. Certainly in the UK, the cost of physically owning a new title is significantly lower than purchasing a digital license. On top of that, you can't sell a digital license, and neither can you buy one from anyone else. If you're looking to port over your existing PS4 library and access it via backwards compatibility, again, a disk drive may be essential depending on the makeup of your current collection. On the face of it, transitioning across to an all-digital ecosystem seems to have a lot of downsides, and it's not the route I'd personally want to take as an exclusive source for my games. With that said, there are clear plus points to digital. What you're getting is an online repository for your games with no potential degradation of media, lost discs or whatever. Plus you have the ability to easily switch between gaming on different consoles without needing a physical key disc. Regardless, the point is that the concept of offering 2 SKUs could potentially soften the blow of an expensive console launch. May well be that we'll see a price split that's like $450 to $499 between the 2 SKUs. Could even go higher than that. And if we're looking at a $499-$549 split, at least some form of PS5 console will be available at a price point we've seen in the past. Xbox One X was 2017's $500 console after all. Any higher and the spectre of the PlayStation 3 launch could overshadow proceedings. Going into the PlayStation 5 reveal, there was still the lingering hope that Sony could have delivered the machine at the $399 price point that served PlayStation 4 and PS4 Pro so well. And I think that revealing that figure at the end of last week's show, directly after showcasing the console and the incredible Horizon Forbidden West, just would have sent the hype level to the stratosphere and possibly beyond. But unless there's some kind of 4-dimensional chess mind games going on here, all the indications are that the new machine will be significantly more expensive, and based on Jim Ryan's comments about price versus value, some level of finessing is required to make that price palatable, especially as we enter economically uncertain times. Well, right now, that makes 3 confirmed next-gen consoles arriving for the holiday season. You've got 2 renditions of PlayStation 5 plus Xbox Series X. And of course, that tally may well increase still further if the 4 teraflop rendition of the new Xbox, the often rumoured Project Lockhart, does come to fruition. Now, if you've been following Digital Foundry across the months, you'll know that I've been fascinated by the concept of this cheaper box and the notion of how a platform holder might compromise on resolution to deliver a much cheaper box. And you can check out my video on some of the projections I ran there. Assuming it does end up reaching stores, it may well be more popular than I previously thought it might be. I mean, Microsoft will have anticipated how expensive next-gen consoles are going to be, because fundamentally they're making one. But they couldn't have predicted a huge economic downturn brought on by a global pandemic. In the meantime though, with the arrival of the digital PlayStation 5, we're definitely going to have more consoles to choose from come the holiday season, regardless of what happens with Project Lockhart. But that's all from me for now, so yeah, like, subscribe, share, you know the score. Ring the bell there for instant notifications when we drop new content on the Digital Foundry YouTube channel. And of course, the DF Patreon, it's there for those who want to support our work more directly. And it's also the route forward in watching our videos the way they were meant to be seen via pristine quality video downloads. But that's all I've got for you right now. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of this one, and thanks for watching and supporting Digital Foundry.